There is a kind of coldness that does not feel human. It is not silence, not cruelty, but something deeper: emptiness. Narcissists do not just hurt people because they enjoy control. They hurt because they cannot feel. Your pain, your joy, your fear, to them, it is background noise in a story where only they exist. Their world has one center, one heartbeat, one voice, their own. What looks like arrogance is actually emotional blindness. What feels like rejection is survival. Today, we are going to uncover why narcissists cannot truly feel compassion, and why empathy threatens their very existence. Narcissists are often described as emotionally cold, self-focused, or indifferent, but the deeper truth is far more complex and psychologically rooted. They do not simply ignore the feelings of others, they are psychologically disconnected from them. The inability to register another person as emotionally real is not a momentary lapse. It is the architecture of their inner world. Narcissists lack compassion, not because they are incapable of noticing emotion, but because they experience human beings as extensions of themselves, rather than as separate interior selves with inner emotional lives. Their emotional universe contains only one center, the self. To understand why narcissists lack empathy, you must understand how they were shaped, what they are protecting, and what they fear more than anything else. The absence of empathy in narcissism is not a mood or a choice. It is a structural deficit created early in psychological development. Narcissists do not form an inner emotional map of other people, because their own inner world never matured beyond self-preservation. To feel empathy, there must be emotional space for another human being. Narcissism eliminates that space and replaces it with ego architecture. The first major reason narcissists lack compassion is the collapse of emotional boundaries in childhood. Instead of learning, others have feelings separate from mine, the narcissistic psyche internalizes, others exist to support my emotional survival. This is why a narcissist responds to your sadness by minimizing it, correcting it, resenting it, or ignoring it. They do not enter your emotional world, they extract control from it. Your feelings become raw material for their ego management. A healthy psyche can step outside itself to witness another perspective. A narcissistic psyche cannot. Instead of perspective taking, they engage in perspective bending. Your emotional reality is bent until it fits their needs, their ego tension, and they're not seen. You are used. This psychological blindness is not visible in the beginning because narcissists can perform empathy. They can mimic concern. They can imitate warmth. They can mirror emotional responses. But it is a performance without internal resonance. They are reacting cognitively, not emotionally. The next reason narcissists lack compassion is the dominance of self-protection over connection. In ordinary relationships, vulnerability is a bridge. In narcissistic psychology, vulnerability is a threat. If they were to truly feel your pain, it would require opening emotional access to their own pain. But their entire identity is built on sealing that doorway shut. Compassion would require confronting their buried shame, their inadequacy, and their hidden emotional emptiness. So the mind rejects empathy to protect the ego. This creates what psychologists often call emotional blindness. It is not that they refuse to care. They cannot afford to care. Caring would collapse the false self they live inside. Their emotional world is like a fortress built around a wound. To empathize is to lower the walls, but if the walls lower, the narcissistic identity loses its shield. And without the shield, they would encounter the unhealed core of their entire psychological system: unbearable shame. Because shame threatens their survival identity, they live in a constant state of emotional deflection. If you are hurting, they convert it into inconvenience. If you are upset, they convert it into blame. If you are vulnerable, they convert it into weakness or manipulation. Every emotional cue from you is filtered through one question: how does this affect me? There is no second question. There is no emotional curiosity about your internal world. Narcissists also lack empathy because they do not see relationships as emotional bonds. They see them as psychological contracts. You provide supply, admiration, validation, status, compliance, attention, or usefulness. In return, they provide presence or approval. Nothing exists outside this exchange. If you break the supply contract by having emotional needs, they withdraw empathy as punishment. Compassion is not seen as a gift. It is seen as a surrender of superiority, and superiority is the shield that keeps the psyche from collapsing. Narcissists conceptualize emotional needs as threats to power. If they validate your feelings, it implies you matter independently of them. That creates equality, which the narcissistic mind experiences as ego death. The absence of empathy is not just coldness, it is hierarchy maintenance. They must remain psychologically above others to preserve identity stability. To empathize would require stepping down from superiority into emotional reciprocity. This is intolerable to them. Empathy also demands presence. Narcissists cannot remain emotionally present because presence creates intimacy, and intimacy requires mutual emotional reality. Narcissists do not tolerate mutuality, they tolerate control. If you express suffering, they do not ask, "What is happening inside you?" their mind reflexively moves to, what does this mean for me? This is why attempts to appeal to their humanity never work. You are speaking to a part of the psyche that no longer exists. The emotional bridge that connects self to others was never built. They live behind glass. They can observe emotion. They can imitate emotion, but they cannot enter it. Another core reason narcissists lack compassion is that they never developed object constancy. In early emotional development, healthy individuals learn that others remain emotionally real, even when not actively giving approval or attention. Narcissists do not have this capacity. If you are not useful in a given moment, you become emotionally non-existent. You disappear. Empathy requires continuity. Narcissism erases it. This is why narcissists can be affectionate one moment and cruel the next without guilt. When you stop providing psychological fuel, you stop existing in their emotional field. They are not thinking I am hurting you. They are thinking you are no longer relevant. The self is the only permanent occupant of their emotional reality. Everyone else is temporary. And here is where people misunderstand them. Narcissists do not fail to feel compassion because they are oblivious. They fail because they are unable to access emotional awareness without dismantling their false identity. To feel you requires feeling themselves, and their internal world is a psychological void they cannot face. It is not hatred of you. It is terror of themselves. The absence of empathy is survival for them. Emotional detachment is protection. Superiority is insulation. Control is oxygen. If they let go of any of these, the repressed shame underneath threatens to surface. That is why they collapse when admiration is withdrawn. Narcissistic rage is not anger at you. It is terror of psychological exposure. The more fragile the ego, the more violent the defense. This brings us to one of the most important truths about narcissism. A narcissist is not emotionally unavailable by accident. They are unavailable by design. Their psyche was forced to choose between emotional connection and psychological survival. They chose survival. And once survival becomes identity, connection becomes dangerous. Compassion requires seeing another person as human. Narcissists cannot afford to see others as human because that would make them accountable to something beyond themselves. Accountability is intolerable to the ego because accountability threatens exposure of inadequacy. So they remain emotionally sealed off. To a narcissist, empathy feels like surrender. Compassion feels like losing control. Vulnerability feels like humiliation. Emotional reciprocity feels like weakness. They are not resisting connection playfully. They are resisting annihilation. Their emotional world is not empty by carelessness. It is empty by necessity. The tragedy is that the narcissist is locked inside themselves. They cannot escape their own reflection long enough to meet another person as a person. To them, every interaction is a reflection test, not a connection moment. You are evaluated for usefulness, not experienced in emotional truth. Narcissists do not love others. They love the mirror that others hold. If you remove the mirror, they feel erased. If you demand empathy, they feel threatened. If you ask them to enter your emotional world, they feel pulled toward the same vulnerability they have spent a lifetime avoiding. Compassion and narcissism cannot coexist because compassion requires emotional humility, and humility dissolves the illusion of superiority the narcissist depends on for psychological survival. The absence of empathy is not just a missing trait. It is the central pillar that upholds the narcissistic identity. Without emotional detachment, the persona collapses. This is why you cannot teach a narcissist empathy through kindness. And this is why appealing to their emotional conscience fails. The psychological organ required for compassion was never developed. You cannot summon what does not exist, and absence cannot be negotiated. Once you understand why narcissists lack empathy, you stop expecting warmth from a frozen landscape. Their indifference is not about you. It is about the emotional void they are trapped inside. They cannot meet your feelings because they have spent a lifetime running from their own. Empathy would melt the armor they built to survive. And without that armor, their entire illusion would collapse. You cannot awaken compassion in someone who sees humanity as danger, but you can protect your own. If this breakdown gave you a clearer view of the psychology behind narcissistic coldness, like, share, and subscribe to Psychanatomy for more deep insights.